Welcome back, everyone, to episode 21 of the Rally Report podcast. Super stoked to have today's guest on. I'm sure he won't be a fan of me calling him a veteran on the tour right now, but but he's making a late career surge up the rankings, and he's been mentioned a couple times on this podcast as the most underrated player on tour. So I'm glad he's getting the recognition he deserves as of late, and especially with the form he's in. He's ranked now 34 in the world. Welcome, Nathan Lake. How are you?
Thanks. Yeah, very good, Sean. Thanks for having me. Who called me the most underrated player on tour? I like that. Sending a Christmas card.
I know Pat Rooney mentioned your name.
Cool.
And your name has been mentioned. I think Spencer might have said your name, and I think Matthias had also mentioned your name. So yeah, your name has been mentioned numerous times on this one.
Just about balances out the fact you called me an old man.
Yeah, I knew I needed to balance it out before calling you a veteran on the tour.
I've never been called a veteran on the tour. That cuts.
I feel like you're at the cusp of veteran status. The transition right now, especially with how many young players are coming up the rankings.
I know, it's disastrous, isn't it?
But I wanted to start this off on a very romantic and wholesome note. And I just wanted to hear your story with Haley with the wedding coming up. I just heard Sunday, right?
Yep.
And I wanted to just hear, how do you guys meet and your guys' journey together? And hopefully she listens in on this beginning part. So yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Thanks for that. I hope I do it justice. So we met as budding keen young squash players in India about 15 years ago. Haley was competing for the US and I was competing for England in the World Junior Championships, which was in Chennai. And the trip started off horrifically for all the English players because we arrived at check-in at Heathrow Airport and we'd all forgotten, or England Squash had forgotten, to apply for any visas for the players. So the next 3 days involved an airport hotel, last-minute meetings for emergency visas at the Indian embassy. But eventually, I think I arrived about 2 hours before my first round match.
That's definitely not ideal.
Yeah, but it was, it wasn't ideal at all. But it got rid of any nerves because I was too tired to think of nerves. But had a good trip and met Haley on a very romantic this. We met in a minibus, a coach that was taking the players from the hotel to the courts. Kept in touch for probably.
How old were you? So you were 18?
No, I think she was 15, I was 16.
Okay. And then you guys kept in touch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we kept in touch for about 8 years. She went off to college, I went on tour, and then after she finished college, it lined up that we were in the same city for a little bit. I went to see her, we hit it off from there. That was about 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. So, yeah.
Wow. And then the wedding is coming up on this Sunday. And how are you feeling about it? You must be incredibly busy.
Yeah, I mean, it might not shock people to hear that I've done very little organising of the whole wedding. The day will be somewhat of a complete surprise to me as well as all the guests. But we're in Chicago at the moment. We fly to New York tomorrow. Guests coming in from tomorrow, Thursday. It'll be a great couple of days. I've got a good amount of friends coming over from the UK, which is nice.
Awesome.
And we've got a lot of people, obviously, from the US. So I'm really looking forward to what will be a very enjoyable couple of days, I think.
That's awesome. So quite the start for 2022. It's been a great start for 2022 for you.
Yes. Yeah. I should say the wedding eclipses everything.
Yeah.
If Haley is listening to this, I should definitely say that. It's been a great start.
Yeah.
It's happening. Moved to Chicago. Squash is going well, and getting to marry Haley. So it's been a good year so far.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
For the wedding. But yeah, I guess it's a good transition to talk about the form you're in right now. And I feel that your rise to the rankings, which I still do believe it's a lot lower than the level you're performing at, but wanted to hear how you feel about your game right now.
Yeah, I feel very positive about it. I feel I'm improving. I feel there's lots of improvement left. And I'm excited to see what I can do. Excited to get on court with higher ranked players, cause damage, learn, get better. And I feel like I've got a lot left in me to give, which is a really exciting position to be in.
Yeah. So the thing I've been curious about is what do you think has been the biggest tweak in your game? Has it been like a technical aspect, or is it physical, or do you think it's a whole like belief factor, like the mental part of the game? What do you think has been the biggest component of this, surge up the rankings and your form?
So a couple of things. So moving to Chicago forced me to change a few things. So I changed my physical coach. That's definitely had a massive change to me. I'm able to play for longer at a higher intensity. There's less of a physical fear against players nowadays, which is massive. And the other big component, you kind of alluded to it, is belief. So that's come partly from the physical improvements and also just ordering my head a bit, changing my mindset to fear challenges and instead now relish them and embrace them, take them on. And that's a real switch. That doesn't happen overnight, and it's still something I'm working on. But I go into matches now really looking forward to the challenge, to the battle. And I'd say those two things have really been the reason for my recent good form.
So have you switched your approach when it comes to the physical training aspect with your new coach, or has just the intensity gone up?
Train a lot harder now, I think. Yeah, I changed it up. Without getting too boring in specific, for a long time, just because I felt that the wear and tear of running on top of squash was a lot to deal with. But I've gone back to running a lot now, and I found that to be massively beneficial. I mean, I'm a big believer that it's horses for courses, as we would say in England. So different players have different training methods that work for them, and so far running's been brilliant for me. And I mean, it's horrible, it's really hard. I've got a running session later today and I get sweaty palms just thinking about it. But there's been a big switch in terms of the physical side. I've embraced it, but I would say almost all of my physical work has completely changed in the last 4 months.
Wow. Gotcha.
So yeah.
I mean, I think it's amazing to see someone at your age making this surge, because I do think right now the tour.
That's the second mention of the age.
Well, it is going through a tour.
When you were asking me come on this show, you weren't saying, we need to balance out the age demographic. We need an old time.
There has been a huge young demographic on my podcast, so I'm really happy that we're getting more variety. But no, I do think there's so many guys who are so young coming up the rankings, and how do you combat that with the energy they come in with, their fearlessness, trying to move up the rankings? Or is that just not something you think of it at all?
I mean, bring it on. It's great. I mean, I need that to push me to improve. If I'm wrong sport, I don't necessarily think about it a lot. But I embrace the challenge and it's sort of energy for more ideas, motivation to train. But I wouldn't say it's something I think about a huge amount. I'm quite intrigued. I would say I'm the first generation to have had gym work, sports science from a young age. So I'm quite intrigued to see how far, what that does to the age of peak performance. Not something I think about massively, but I'm just intrigued to see if that elongates careers. And I don't necessarily think a huge amount about young players, but when I do, again, that mindset, the belief, just embrace it. It's great. Bring it on.
And what do you think at this very moment is the biggest difference between you and the very top? And what do you think you have to do to catch up to them?
By very top, what do you mean?
Why don't I ask you if you could give us a run through at your most recent match with Coll? What did you think was the difference, in any lessons you got from that match?
Yeah, I think Paul's playing he's clearly the best player in the world at the moment. And he now brings, everyone talks about his physicality, and I think he gets a lot more recognition now about his skill and his squash and his tactics. He brings a complete package to the table. There's a physical test. He's getting balls back that not many human beings can get back. And there's a huge amount of pressure that he puts on you by the options and the tightness he hits. So I felt in my match there was that, and my skill level. And and my physicality still need to come a long way. But a big thing when you're on there with someone like that is not bigging him up too much, not thinking, geez, he's going to get a lot of balls back, or he's hitting the ball well in the knockup. Stupid things like that those little self-doubts that everyone has. The more pressure I'm under against those top guys, those doubts come in. So a big thing for me, I think, to make a jump is to try and eradicate those doubts, mental and physical pressure, to keep the focus and ignore the stuff that is irrelevant, is useless. Just focus what allows me to focus on maximizing what I can bring to the table. So that's one of the big things I've come away to sort of improve on and work on the next time I have a shot at him.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, now I wanted to talk about one of your recent big wins as well that I thought you played phenomenally well in. It was against Greg Marche in the Canary Wharf. And I know you've had very close battles in the past, but what would just run us through that match as well? Because I think a lot of people would be curious to hear, your tactics and everything.
Yeah, that was a weird one because we played in January and I got very close. I don't think I had a match ball, but I was 2-love up, I think, and I think the fourth went 12-10. It was a really, really close match. And I was maybe unlucky not to quite get across the line. So this one I had to be quite careful not to go in with any too many memories of the last match, because he would have learned a bit about me. I've got the beauty of seeing a lot of these top guys play a lot more than they see me play. It's changing now, but that is an advantage. And so I've tried to go in with a real blank slate. And he'd had a couple of bad results, or what he would deem at 10 or 11 in the world as bad results. So I felt he was, without sounding too nasty, I felt he was vulnerable. And and like we were talking about that belief, I back myself. And if you can't get excited playing a top player in England in probably the greatest event in the UK, what are you doing? So I tried to go in with a blank slate, tried to get stuck in, show him I was up for it, because I thought mentally, when Greg's on, the way he moves, the way he hits the ball, it just looks effortless. And then when you watch me sometimes, it looks the complete opposite of that. So, I wanted to show him that I was up. I thought the first game I got a good lead and sort of did pretty well. And then in the second, I thought he dropped off a little bit towards the end. I managed to get a lead and he maybe didn't fight. That was my thought process going into it, to make him doubt himself, make it physically tough, show him that I'm going to stick around, just disappear in 10 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it was just awesome. Just the whole tournament itself, the atmosphere, the crowd is just like electric.
Yeah, it's great.
Moving on to that next match with Mostafa Asal, that was also, I know that was a loss, but that was brilliant. I thought that was just a brilliant quality match, just as a fan standpoint. And
great.
It must be a little different prepping up for a match like that, with just playing him and the gravity and the presence he brings to the table. How did you even manage to combat that?
I mean, it's great. Like it sounds like you watched both matches. But England v France, a big rivalry, so the crowd's going to be on. So I knew that the crowd was probably going to be on my side, and it was just a great opportunity. He hadn't played a match for 2 or 3 months. There's going to be a lot of doubt in his mind. I've just come off the best win of my career, so there was definitely like a come down after the Marche match. I had a rest day in between, and I needed that just emotionally to people want to send you messages and say, well done. And all that sort of responding, interacting is quite tiring. And also trying to sleep after a massive win, I sometimes find hard. So to have that day was really valuable. And then it was just about, there were definitely nerves. There always is, because I care about it. But there was a real excitement of, I can get stuck in. I got nothing to lose here. Let's go out there and, prove I can get stuck into these boys and put a bit of doubt in his mind. And I mean, I loved it, to be honest. I loved the physicality. It was a great challenge. I mean, I think he's potentially great for the sport. I think he is good for the sport. Yeah. And it was really, really enjoyable to be a part of that match.
Yeah. I mean, you could tell the belief was there. I think everyone was watching was like, this definitely could be an upset in the making. So, I mean, it was just brilliant to watch. But I wanted to kind of transition into something I haven't asked other people, but I think would be really relevant to ask. I wanted for you to point out the highest point in your career, whether it be through a specific match or just anything with squash life in general, and also pinpoint when was the lowest point in your career so far.
There's been lots of both. I'd say at the moment it's probably the best I've felt in my career, and Marche was definitely by far the biggest career win I've had. But there's been huge amounts of low points. Like you keep alluding to, I'm an old man, so I've had a long time on tour. I've probably been on tour over 10 years now, and there's been so many bad times. I remember when I joined the tour at 18 and I was a decent junior. I just got battered for 2 years, it felt like, just playing against fully grown men that had 2 to 10 years on tour training, were physically strong. That was definitely a low point. I remember someone in my team saying, hang in there, this will be the toughest part of your career. And that was really difficult. I struggled with injury when I was about 22, 23, was a bit lost. COVID was, and I've been very lucky in the sense that I've been able to get into the big events through COVID, which were the only tournaments happening. But that was brutally tough for all players. But I definitely found it hard. A lot of self-doubt. What am I doing? Not making any money, losing money. That was really hard. So I'm not dodging your question. I'd definitely say the high point is at the moment, but there's been several low points, and anyone who thinks it's all plain sailing is sadly mistaken. But that's what makes the good parts more enjoyable, because it's not like that all the time.
Were there moments in your career where you wanted to just hang up the racket?
I'd say COVID was the closest. I love squash. I'm a squash nerd, a squash history nerd. I love. Haley makes fun of me because I love following the old stuff, and But I've never come that close. But COVID was definitely close because, I hate to give fuel to your fire, but because I am a little bit older, and because I'm getting married, and Haley and I want a family together one day, all those sort of things. Stuff I wasn't worried about when I was 22, 23. COVID was definitely the closest I'd come. And I'd love to know, if you interviewed all the players anonymously, what percentage actually came close, because I bet it was quite a lot. I'd be really interested to know, because, it was tough, really tough for players. And although most players rejoin the PSA, I think we're now starting to see players drop off. Like, it's been a slow effect of what COVID's done to people. People have gone on to other things, or maybe they've missed. COVID was the closest I've come to hanging up the rackets. But I wouldn't hang the rackets up completely. I'd love to be playing when I'm 75. But in terms of professionally, that was the closest.
Yeah, that would be an interesting thing to look into. Because, everyone I interviewed always mentioned how tough the COVID period was for them. But, I'm glad you didn't hang up the racket then, because considering the success that's coming your way right now, and hopefully...
It's one thing, without sounding too philosophical, one thing I've found in my career is, at my elder age, is that quite often the real dark times create great opportunities. So in America, you use an analogy called a Hail Mary, don't you? Where like someone throws a crazy... I threw a few of those. I did some things I wouldn't have normally done. So I reached out to a coach I might not have reached out to, or I started a conversation with someone. So it's hard to just be negative on that situation, because, a lot of what I'm doing now, I think I wouldn't be doing exactly what I'm doing now if COVID hadn't been a thing as well. So it's a double-edged sword. I think I tried maybe that.
Yeah. That is a good point. Hopefully a lot of the players who are listening into this, don't shut down when they go through those negative points. Now, another question I had for you was, selfishly speaking, is there one thing you wish the PSA did better for players like yourself, whether it be through marketing you better reffing system? Like, if there's one thing you've always been frustrated about, what would it be?
I do think the PSA are really trying to sharpen their act up across the board. Helping players become better businesses, I think. And it's something that the PSA Foundation are trying to do. But helping players market themselves, help give them to bring more money into the game, apart from, approaching big global sponsors, tour sponsors. I think if we could educate the players better in terms of how to find sponsors, how to make money, that all means more money coming into the squash.
Yeah.
As a squash player, that although that money isn't going towards a tournament or anything like that, I am growing the squash network. I'm more likely than maybe to put money into an event. I'm more likely to tell my business partners I sponsor a squash player. They become aware of squash. Like, I think that would be a good thing and something they could improve in the sense that it would be very far reaching.
So I do know you've spoken a lot about sponsorships in your recent interview with Squash Radio, and if anyone's interested in hearing more about that, I think they should listen to the Squash Radio episode, because it is I think it's phenomenal to hear about how you tackle. But one question I had was, at what age did you feel that, okay, I'm kind of getting the hang of how to do this in terms of branding myself, in terms of financially
You're always learning, right? So
yeah.
I enjoy that stuff, and I'm always intrigued by partnerships, relationships athletes have. You're pretty good at what you do, right? I bet you're still listening to other podcasts and trying to learn and change things and hone your skills. I'm pretty good at squash, but I'm still trying my damnedest to learn from people, better players. I think as soon as you rest on your laurels there, I think.
So, okay. Wanted to move on to what I find most interesting about your journey is that you're no stranger to moving around locations and where you base yourself. And right now you're based in Chicago, which I think to many may seem odd because of, I think the recent trend in squash is a lot of countries are creating hubs for their national players to work together. But I feel that you've been operating independently and you're also making it work. And I'm curious to hear, how have you managed to make it work? Because I feel that you are taking a very different approach.
Yeah, it's not always by choice. I was based so I'm from Cheltenham, England, southwest England, and I lived there. I spent a year when I was 18. I moved up to the National Centre in Manchester, and I learnt a lot. That was quite a low time, actually, just because I essentially moved there, just played squash, didn't really have a social life, didn't really do much else. So that was quite tough. And I'd say till I was about 23, 24. And then Hayley's from, is my fiance. She's from Brooklyn. So we did 6 months. It worked out being sort of 3 months here, 3 months there, but 3 months in Cheltenham, 3 months in Brooklyn, 3 months in Cheltenham. And then we moved to Chicago 6 months ago. It's tricky. It is tricky, and every place has its upsides and downsides. But ultimately, like the move to Chicago, I want to be with Hayley, and she had the NBA opportunity here. So it's just a reality of the situation. I've chosen to go out with Hayley and marry Hayley later this week. So, just the facts are that Hayley's from America. It's just the reality of the situation. It wasn't really a choice. That said, I've enjoyed it, and I love being based over in the US. Lots of tournaments over here. Very supportive of squash. Great community of squash in Chicago, but across America. People are very positive, which is nice. We like to be quite miserable in the UK sometimes, and that's part of our humor, and I enjoy that. And I miss that when I'm here, but I do find the positive part really good for my squash. So yeah, and I've never really, I was funded by England Squash when I was 18 and 19, and then I moved it wasn't that dramatic. I didn't receive funding after that and haven't since. So there's nothing really.
Is it very cutthroat with ranking point? How do they?
I wouldn't say it's cutthroat. Players that moan about it not saying lots of players do, but players that moan about it. I mean, I've got no divine right for England squash to give me money. I play squash because I want it. I don't play squash for England squash. Love to play for England, but I don't do it for England squash. I do it because I want to be better. I want to improve. And so it is, you are set a list of targets, but you'd be set a list of targets at your job. And if you don't meet them, there are penalties. And, I maybe wasn't at a level that they wanted me to be at that time. And in fact, I would say it's probably been one of the best things to happen to me being taken off funding, because I had to be more aware of, like, without sounding too cringy, like creating a brand, getting sponsors. I had to find my own coaches. And the benefit of that was that those coaches had a real passion for me. They weren't, governing body coaches that are looking after a group of players that do a fantastic job. But I do think it's not as good as someone who's got one person or a group of people they coach that they care and there's a real strong bond. I'm not saying that can't happen with a governing body, but my belief is that I've benefited from being outside of that. So So I didn't have any ties. I could go wherever I liked, and blame Haley. Essentially, that's what I'm saying. Blame Haley.
And so once Haley finishes up with the NBA in Chicago, are you guys planning to be back in New York? Or
I think she would love to be, and I love New York as well. But I've been really surprised how much I love Chicago. Like, the squash community here, great. It's just a beautiful place. I mean, it gets a bit cold, but that wasn't as bad as I expected this winter. It's I've really fallen in love with the city, and so I'd be happy in either. But if I was a betting man, and on the basis of our first 7 years together, I think it'll be New York. But that'll be fantastic. We love it there. And Haley's family are mostly still there as well.
What was the biggest adjustment for you culturally when you moved from England to the US?
You're so positive. Like, you used to go into stores and people would, in America, they say, hey, how's your day going? And if you reply, sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, someone just replied to me. What do I say now? What does the computer say? That always made me laugh. And I really missed, when I moved here, after about a month, I missed going for a cup of tea and just moaning about the weather or politics or the fact not as much here. There's a bit more of a positive, can-do attitude, and I miss the negativity less and less. But that was the funniest, how positive everyone is, which I found very alarming at the time.
And as a lefty myself, and hopefully there are a bunch of lefty listeners out there, what would you say is the one biggest advice you give to all lefties?
Get it on that forehand wall. It's a massive advantage. I mean, the lefty thing does help because our forehands are generally stronger than a righty's backhand, so that's one big thing. And
I mean, you seem pretty comfortable with your backhand. Is something I've noticed about your game.
We get a lot of practice because a lot of righties try and get it there.
I think a lot of people try to stay away from the backhand as a lefty, but I don't know. I could be wrong in saying this, but I feel like you don't really mind it on that side.
Yeah, I don't mind it too much. It's definitely an advantage being a lefty, I think.
And do you find playing left-handed players more difficult?
Yeah, it throws you. Yeah, it does throw you. Just because the way your brain is hardwired to, when someone takes you in short to the front, you automatically lift a right-hander's backhand, because we just play right-handers 95% of the time. So, the same as, and they're welcome with my forehand as opposed to my backhand. I get exactly the same shock when I do the same to a lefty. So it's and we just don't play them very often, do we? It's just a reality.
The tour does not have a lot of lefties. I mean, I guess with Yusuf Ibrahim on the rise, and then we got Kendra, and then we have
Adrian Waller,
so
there's maybe not as many as, I don't know what's the ratio. Do you know that, the population lefties to righties?
I do not know that.
But yeah, there's normally, I mean, been some unbelievable lefties over the years. Chris Marche, Shabana, Peter Nicol, Jonah Barrington. And we definitely lack a lefty at the top of the game. But yeah, I used to watch a lot of those lefties growing up, and just I find it fascinating.
Yeah. And what is your biggest goal at this very moment when it comes to squash?
Well, I'd like to play for England. That's always been a massive goal as a senior. I mean, I want to push top 20. I want to get as high as I possibly can. And I think I'd be doing myself a disservice if I said a low or a bigger number than that. Yeah, like you said, I'm an elderly man, as you keep pointing out. So I'm determined to give it absolutely everything while I can. And I think I can get a lot higher, and I'm excited to keep trying to climb those rankings. Yeah.
Well, appreciate that. But yeah, well, moving on to the quickfire segment.
Fire away.
So Nathan, you're 10 love down in the fifth. Are you the player to go for it, or are you going to play it out?
Play it out.
Play it out.
Yeah.
Thoughts on best of three?
Like it. It's been good for me. Selfishly speaking, yeah, it's good for me.
Do you think it should be, how about in terms of the tour, do you think it should be incorporated more?
I think we've got to be quite careful that squash prides itself in being one of the most physical sports on the planet.
Yes.
And I think if we go down the best of three, I mean, if there's massive commercial opportunities that can be explored through best of three, maybe, but I do think we need to remember that we're a brutal sport, and that's our selling point, best of five is part of that.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on doubles?
World doubles has just started today.
Just started, yeah.
What are my thoughts on doubles? Very interesting, mentally very challenging, difficult game.
Have you dabbled in a lot of doubles?
Are we talking about softball doubles or hardball doubles?
I was asking softball.
Softball, yeah. I did quite a lot the last year. England squash have been holding like monthly camps to try and expose players, and I've really enjoyed it. I think it's probably helped my singles a little bit, because you have to think so far out the box to find space on a court. Mentally very, very hard. Yeah.
And who would your ideal partner be?
It has to be a righty, because I want to play on the left hand. It's a tricky one. Paul Coll would be pretty good, wouldn't he? He'd get a lot of balls back and do a lot of damage with his squash. Yeah, probably Paul Coll, because he plays a lot of doubles as well, obviously being from a Commonwealth country.
Yeah. What string tension do you use?
I use 22.5 pounds pre-stretched Technofaber 305.
Wow, that's pretty low.
Yeah, that's what everyone keeps telling me. Yeah, I'm quite funny about it as well. I've got a stringer in Cheltenham that strings all my rackets on an electric machine. So I just travelled back from England with 14 strung rackets, because I'm very particular about it.
Yeah,
I think it's probably because I'm an old man, an elderly man. I like things a certain way, and I'm very particular. There's a guy in New York that does my rackets for me as well, but yeah, 22.5 pounds pre-stretched.
Yeah, and one person you'd like to see on the commentator's booth other than the usual people?
That is a good question. You've stumped me there. Who would I like to listen to? I don't know. Who have you had? Any other?
Well, I've mentioned I'd like to hear Chris Gordon more. I think he's very knowledgeable of.
Passionate as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he's different. I don't know. I just like to see more funny, professional players on, having a go at it.
Yeah, in my opinion, when I listen to sport, I like someone who's got quite a unique accent. I like someone who's quite funny and just can make paint drying seem interesting. An excitable Jonathan Power, I think, would be brilliant, because he's. I used to love, he was just could just get your attention. Who else? I don't know. That's a tricky one.
Would you go for it if you? Is that something of interest for you?
I'd give it a go. Yeah, I'd give it a go. I think the reality is it's a lot harder than people think.
Yeah, and I mean, especially Joey and PJ, I think have been doing phenomenal. I think they're getting better at it by the year.
That's not a good. I'd probably say, Jonathan Power would be interesting. I'd just like to listen to him. Jonah would be brilliant. Jonah Barrington, because he's probably one of the few people I've ever met. When I watch him speak or I speak to him, I get the room to be silent. When I've seen him do public speaking, I've seen him speak to 250 people, and there is not. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone is just so absorbed in listening to him, and he's just a great storyteller. So I think he would be, from the squash world. I'm trying to also wrap my brains for people outside the squash world, but I just think he's got a brilliant voice. Obviously, who he is commands huge respect. Yeah. I think he'd be brilliant. I'd love to hear him and Joey again. I know they've done a couple. He would be the one.
And if you were to play for a U.S. college squash team, which team would you like to play for?
Well, I think I'm almost legally obliged to say Harvard because my future wife is at Harvard. I could stir the pot and say Yale, but I'm not going to do that because I value my quality of life. But it's funny, Haley's sister, her long-term boyfriend is a bulldog, and he gets so much abuse for going to Yale from Haley and her sister. It's unfair. So occasionally I'll try and help him out, but I should say for my own safety, Harvard.
And what are your thoughts on nicknames for PSA players?
I think it's good fun. As long as they're nice, as long as they're not too nasty on players. But I think it's good fun, and I know, when I go back to the club in Cheltenham, they'll reference players by their nicknames. So I mean, I think it's good. I think it's good fun. It's my gut feeling. You?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think it's good. I think some are getting a little forced upon, but on the known ones, I think are brilliant for sure.
Yeah, I think the top players, I think the nicknames are great, and I think it's good fun.
And now, Nathan, who do you think is the most underrated player on tour for you?
Nathan Lake, I heard. That's what people are saying.
It's the word out right now.
Most underrated player on tour. Cool. That's a tough one. Not that I know a huge amount about him, but there was the Q8 #1 whose name escapes me, who's beaten players as high as Darryl, and he's an absolute nightmare. Left-hander. A couple of Farhan Mahboob, left-hander, Pakistani. Mm-hmm. Very, very good player. But has been very high in the sort of, whilst I've been on tour, he's dropped down, but has. Who else? I think Mahesh, the Indian guy.
Yeah.
He's quite underrated. I'm playing him hopefully in a couple of weeks if he wins his first round, so that'll be a good.
Oh, for which tournament?
In about 2 weeks. I'd say he's a bit underrated. There's a lot of players. There's a big queue of players trying to get into these major events, and there's not a huge amount between any of them. So
now I have to ask, just to stir the pot, who do you think is the most overrated player on tour?
Most overrated. I can't answer that, can I? Because I've got to go and see these people again. I could say someone who's 290 in the world, who I might not come into contact with quite as much. Most overrated player. Can I plead the fifth and not answer that? Yeah, so some people have taken that route for this question, but I have a follow-up. Has anyone said Nathan Lake on this one as well? No, no one said that. Don't say your name. Who is one player you dislike playing then? Oh man, I mean these are These are headline clickbait questions you're asking here. You're being a good journalist. Who do I hate playing? Right, who's retired? Oh, I didn't used to like playing McGueed. That was always physical because he was a big, strong guy.
I've got Adrian Waller for this question.
Oh, what just hate? And what was the reason?
I think someone just because of his size, it's hard to see.
No, I wouldn't say that too much. McGueed was definitely one. Physically, was a big presence.
Yeah.
I'll say him because he's also not on tour, so he can't come and get me. He's also a dentist as well, which I always found quite amusing.
Oh wow, I didn't know that at all.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
He's a dentist. But no, I think I'll go with him because he's retired.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up for the squash ones. But now moving on to some life ones. What is your favorite British slang?
Ooh, I like a bit of Cockney slang. Do you know what Cockney slang is?
No, you got to explain it to me.
So it's like a London-based slang where you say two words that rhyme that give you the word. So I do half the work for you. So if I say I've got to go up the apples and pears and get my phone, what am I saying? Apples and pears, what comes to mind?
I'm lost.
Haley was completely lost as well. Apples and pears, stairs. So I've got to go up the apples and pears. I've got to go up the stairs.
Well, that's quite like very confusing. Okay, that's confusing.
That's quite good fun. British slang. We like to say mate a lot. Yeah, anyone's your mate, even if you've met them 10 seconds earlier. Yeah, I'd say Cockney rhyme and slang, or I won't come up with one because I'll embarrass myself.
And if you're shipwrecked on an island and all your basics are covered, what are the two things you bring with you?
I'd have to bring some kind of candy, I think, to mentally give myself some relief. I love podcasts. Could I get like an endless... I listen to a podcast called Desert Island Discs. I don't know if you ever listened to that. It's a famous BBC podcast, and they interview famous people, and the whole song selections.
Oh wow! Uh-huh.
And it's called Desert Island Discs because at the end of the podcast you get put on a desert island, and you can choose one item to stick with you. So I feel I should be mentally prepared for this. But could I have like access to Spotify? I think that could be a
good one. Yeah.
So some sweets, access to Spotify. You'd be set. It'd be a good couple of years before I'd go crazy.
Now, best and worst purchase you've made.
Best purchase could be these Bose headphones. Yeah. I'm not currently sponsored by Bose, but if they do want to get in touch. Feel free.
You heard it here first.
But no, they're brilliant because we travel so much as players, and it's so noisy on planes. I remember when I bought these, thinking this is the most expensive purchase I probably have ever made in my life. But I mean, that was 6 years ago, and they're fantastic. Worst purchase. I once bought a suede rock star-like coat from a Camden vintage shop when I was shopping alone, which I think is one of my best purchases, but the proof is I've very rarely, if ever, worn it in public. So I'd probably say that has got to be up there. That was a bad purchase. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then biggest pet peeve?
Haley's not here, but she's known for that. Yeah, people not doing the dishes, that annoys me. Untidiness. I'm not a fan of untidiness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you very peculiar with how you like things?
Not particularly. Just clean. Sean. Just don't like them dirty. Don't like it messy. So yeah, that's what I would say is my pet peeve.
Got it. Well, thank you. And I'm going to move on to the Instagram questions, which is really funny with you because everyone asked the same question.
Oh, really? What was it?
I think,
favorite milk?
Yes, it is. It's just variation of milk questions.
Yeah.
So can you give us the backstory of... Well, I realized I went on your Instagram profile and I saw Fueled by Milk, And I was like, there must be a story to this because everyone's been asking, is milk a vital part of his diet plan? Green top or blue top milk? How much milk does he drink? And does American milk even compare to the UK?
No, it doesn't. So as a British person, I drink a lot of tea. I don't drink coffee. I drink tea. I probably drink three cups of tea a day. And the tea tastes differently here than it does in the UK. I'm sure this is really gripping listening for your viewers and listeners, but tea does not taste the same here. And I remember talking to Paul Johnson about this actually, and he first put me onto the idea, but it's the milk that is not the same. So the tea doesn't taste the same. But I do. Yeah, I could tell you're very interested in that. I do like my milk, and when I was probably mid-20s, I was looking for a sponsor. And where I'm from in Cheltenham, there is a famous, quite big dairy company called Cotswold Dairy, and one of the only reason I really knew of them was because when I was a high school kid, when I was about 14 or 15, I used to run sometimes in the mornings. And there used to be a section of the run that I would always meet the milk float. Do you know what a milk float is?
No, it's someone who's selling milk.
It's someone who's delivering milk. So the milkman would drive a milk float, and it's in where I'm from. It's an electric powered vehicle with a top speed of 14 miles an hour, going downhill. And I used to run at the same time. This guy would be doing the rounds on this certain route. So I would overtake, what was it? No, the milk float would overtake me. There was a section of the run like that, essentially. And I would be running along here, and all of a sudden the milk float would zoom by me at 14 miles an hour. But then going up the hill, it would probably slow to at best a 6 or a 7. So I would always be on this run. It would overtake me, but the challenge would be to catch it on the hill. So that's how I was aware of the company. And I reached out to them, and I sent them an email. I mean, I've probably sent hundreds of emails, but I never had anything back. But somehow the email got through to the owner of the dairy, and he came down to the club, and they've been on board as a sponsor or partner.
Oh, that's incredible! Yeah.
And I did actually on my Instagram profile. There's a video of it, but we did about 4 years ago. I did a shift as a milkman, so I woke up at 3 a.m. and we delivered 500 glasses and bottles of milk, which was an experience and a very hard gig. So yeah, that's where a lot of it comes from, I think.
So are they sending you milk to Chicago right now?
No, they're not sending me milk from the UK to Chicago. That would be bad tasting milk by the time it got here. So yeah, but it's always a treat when I go back.
Yeah. Got it. Well, glad to know the backstory behind that because there were so many questions in regard to that. But I think I'm going to wrap it up there, folks.
Cool.
Thank you, Nathan, for joining in. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Yeah.